Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of The House of Monstrous Women by Daphne Fama. This is a book from Berkeley. It's coming out August 12th, so next week, 2025. It's a gothic horror. I received this book from NetGalley in exchange for a fair review. A house of horrors that is also a metaphor for standing up against oppression. The House of Monstrous Women is a creepy and lush novel of generational trauma and resistance. What's it about? Orphaned after her father's political campaign ended in tragedy, Josephine is alone taking care of the family home while her brother is off in Manila, where revolution brews. But an unexpected invitation from her childhood friend Haraya to her house offers an escape. Why don't you come visit and we can play games like we used to? If Josephine wins, she'll get whatever her heart desires. Her brother is invited too, and it's time they had a talk. Josephine heard the dark whispers. Haraya is a witch, and her family spits curses. But still, she's just desperate enough to seize this chance to change her destiny. Except Roanoke House is strange, labyrinthine and dangerously close to the treacherous sea. A sickly sweet smell clings to the dimly lit walls, and veiled eyes follow Josephine through endless connecting rooms. The air is tense with secrets, and as the game continues, it's clear Josephine doesn't have the whole truth. To save herself, she will have to play to win, but in this house, victory is earned with blood. Very cool. So something that runs through this entire book kind of minimally, I guess because the characters mention it a few times, but it's something that kind of like directly affects the plot, is the People Power Revolution in the Philippines in 1986. You don't need to know anything about that going into it, really, as if you use your brain only slightly, you can understand what that was in relation to how Josephine thinks of what it is. In truth, I requested this book so long ago, I had no idea what it was when I went into it, which is how I prefer to go into books anyway. But I found myself intrigued by what was clearly a real-life event, and I looked it up later. So, to be clear, I did not know what this was when I was going into it either, and I wholly enjoyed this book. If you are curious and want to read this book but don't know what this is, I'll just briefly say that it was a nonviolent revolution which ended the 20-year dictatorship of a man, Ferdinand Marcos, who had been growing increasingly violent and undemocratic as a leader. It says in the blurb that Josephine's parents are killed, and it's mentioned in the first chapter, so this isn't really a spoiler. But the one thing I wasn't clear on related to this whole people power thing, was whether her parents were supposed to be linked to the real man who was assassinated, or if her parents' story was meant to represent this sort of thing as kind of like a parallel story. Either way, what I'm trying to say is that this is a gothic horror with layers of meaning. If you know a lot about the Philippines, if you're Filipino, or if you're like, descendants of people from Filipino, or just have like studied Filipino history, you'll probably get a lot out of this from like a historical point of view. But if you know nothing about it, you can still completely enjoy this story. It's full of creepy hallways, body horror, dark magic, and it's just like a little bit more than just surface level horror, though, that's all. I wouldn't say it was terrifying, as it's more of like a slow burn horror until kind of near the end, but it definitely has parts that are high adrenaline, and if you're freaked out by bugs, well, this one has a lot of bugs. I don't think I've seen this many bugs in a book in a long time. There is some body horror, but it's not overly graphic. I was never really grossed out, but I guess that's subjective. There might be some scenes in this that really gross people out. For me, I was like, that's not too bad. The setting is very cool. It's an island off the Philippines with a huge, twisty mansion with labyrinthine halls and freakish servants and very odd room decor. It was hard to picture, but I think that's the point. It's meant to be confusing and almost kind of eldritch in its immensity and creepiness, and the descriptions we get are lush and very specific. So I could tell what each room looked like that she entered, just not how the house was laid out, and I think that's intentional. It gave it a very mimetic feel, a word that I love, as we're just as turned around as Josephine when we're reading, and it worked really well in how we're like, how do we escape? And I was like thinking to myself, because I was like, why doesn't she just leave? And I was like, wait, I don't even know where the front door is. Josephine is a great character. She has clear motivations, and while she's much too loyal and kind of giving to her friends and family, there's a reason for that, she's also tough and brave and smart. She felt very well-rounded and very human. The few side characters we get are good, but I think we could have used a bit more flashbacks to really cement the relationship with Josephine. A certain plot line would have hit harder, I think, emotionally, if we'd seen her and this certain person's relationship when they were younger, kind of how close they were growing up, that kind of thing. And it would be also nice to see why Josephine had such like a hard-on for her friend Haraya. I mean, I just don't see why. She was kind of annoying. But that's just me. Along with apparently Filipino history. I don't know much about Filipino myths. So while this book is said to be based on some of these, I personally couldn't tell what was based on that and what was like the author's imagination. But I can tell you that this story has so much cool, interesting lore, specifically the monstrous elements. I'm probably going to say these wrong. The Aswang and the Encanto. And part of the fun for me was being introduced to these new things, much like when I read the book Pinata, which had a really cool monster that I hadn't really heard of. So I really love kind of learning these new mythologies and these new kind of cultural stories, and I thought that was awesome. The book is also very thematically rich. The entire thing is about oppression, as I mentioned before, weaving in the real-life political aspects of the late 1980s, but also women's oppression. Women in the 80s in the Philippines could still be married off without their consent, like for a dowry. I was like, what? Like, I thought for a while, I was like, wait a minute, is this set in the 1880s? But I was like, no, it's 1980s. I was like, oh my God. And the oppressive nature of generational trauma is a huge part of this book too. But also how oppression is often parasitic, something that is shown again and again in the novel through imagery like the belite trees. I think that's how you say it. I looked it up, but I can't remember now, because those are, a parasitic tree. So there's a lot of kind of references to things that are parasitic, and I thought that was really interesting. Even Josephine's own acceptance of her life to a certain extent is a parasitic one. And I just think that that was a really cool way of tying in to how the government was being parasitic. All of these, everything is woven together in such an interesting, cool way. The book is also beautifully written. There are passages like, and this is an arc, so these might be removed or changed for the final, but I wanted to share to show you how good this is. No, more than that, she didn't want to know the answer. Even pretending for just one more night was sweeter than learning it had all been in her head from the start. And it was easy to imagine it was her own body laid out on the table, her skin peeled away, her muscles and fat plucked and gobbled until she was nothing but scraps and bones, no longer worth consuming. You'll find a lot of visceral descriptions like this in the story, and I loved it. I thought it was great. Overall, I thought this was an excellent example of a modern gothic horror. Great mansion, forbidding setting, women main character, deeper themes, and some creepy ass scenes. And we also get a bit of queer rep too, so that was great. It's like the whole deal. So as you couldn't tell, I thought this book was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And thanks for watching, and thanks to the publisher and NetGalley for the e-arc. What's with my shirt? It's like falling down.